G'day, ZiggyD here. Today I want to share with you guys the results of a bunch of testing I did today in Path of Exile, trying to find out which is the most efficient zone to farm experience outside of maps. Now the reason I wanted to find this out is because in patch 1.0.0 they made a few changes. They changed the experience penalties, and they also changed the amount of zones that we have available to us to farm. They added in some extra zones and changed around some levels and things like that. So I thought it would be really interesting to find out how viable it is to get XP outside of maps on a high-ish level character, and which of those zones is actually best to do so. So my general methodology was to run the most popular XP farming spots at the moment in the game. There might be some other zones that people find to be good later on, but for now I ran Docks, Lunaris, Library, and Catacombs. I did 3 runs in each zone, recording the time and calculating the XP per hour for those zones. I also played this solo on a level 79 character, so I will be experiencing some penalties for being a higher level than the zone, but I did all of these zone farming runs on the same level 79 character, so that won't change at all between the runs, so it's still a good comparison. I also used as efficient farming techniques as possible, for example only picking up rares and currency, skipping scrolls and things that weren't really nearby me, and only opening chests that are close by on my run. So, let's jump into some of my results. The first one I did was Docks. Now Docks is a level 62 zone, so the XP penalties are going to be in full force. We already know Docks is an excellent zone to run when you first get into Act 3 Merciless and need to gear yourself up and level up a little bit, but I also wanted to put this into the comparison just to see how viable it actually is to get to level 100 in Docks, and that's something that Chris Wilson kind of mentioned when they removed the cap on XP penalty, so that you could still get some experience in Docks even when you're level 90 something. So, across 3 runs, my average run time was around 3 minutes 45. It's pretty quick. My XP per hour was 6,622,180, so 6.62 million XP per hour, which, you know, seems okay, but when we look at the other zones, we see that it's very, very, very low. Now, some notes about this zone is it's incredibly safe. The only thing that's a risk to most people is either Storm Heralds in Nemesis League or lesser multiple projectiles, Void Bearers, if you don't have good fire resist. On my character, I'm running Arctic Armor, however, so I can pretty much AFK in this zone and never die. It's incredibly safe. However, it does have low-level loot. That's something also to consider. At level 62, the max eye level of loot that can drop is 64, and you're not going to get very good mod rolls on that compared to some of the other zones we're going to look at. There's also a lot of backtracking down piers, and you have to portal out of the zone when you actually finish clearing it as well. So, yeah, it's a little bit rough. It's not my favorite zone to farm, but it's still very nice to farm a little bit earlier on. But I don't think so once we stack it up against these other ones that it's really viable for farming over long periods of time on higher level characters. So the next thing I did was Lunaris runs without killing Piety. Now this Lunaris 2 is level 65 and Lunaris 3 is level 66. I was a bit unsure about how to go about recording and doing this run because you have to do something weird. You have to waypoint into Lunaris 2 and then try and find Lunaris 3. Now this changes the runtime by quite a bit sometimes because occasionally you'll run off in one direction, you'll end up finding the exit to Lunaris 1 rather than Lunaris 3, and that adds a bit of extra time to your sort of run. I decided to just record each time how long it took to kind of quickly clear through Lunaris 2, only killing off big packs and blue packs, and trying to find Lunaris 3 exit as quickly as possible, and then clearing Lunaris 3 through up to Piety pretty efficiently, killing down the big packs and blues and things like that, and skipping really dodgy rares in there. So, the run times varied by quite a lot. I had runs that were as short as 5 minutes 30, and I had runs that were as long as 11 minutes 42. So you can get lost, or you can spend a long time in Lunaris 2 trying to find the exit, and this changed it up. But despite this, the XP per hour was actually pretty good. My average XP per hour across all of the runs, even with all that variability, was 18,392,488. So 18.39 million XP per hour. Pretty reasonable, especially considering it's only 65-66 zone. Now, a few of my notes about this zone is that there's lots of potential time wasting finding level 3. I kind of already covered that. Overall, it's pretty safe. Most people won't have a problem in here if they're trying to farm, you know, trying to do some out-of-map XP farming at a higher level. But things like vulnerability on hit combined with being surrounded and taking a lot of physical damage and things like that can be pretty dangerous, and people do die in Lunaris. It still has its dangers, so it's not completely safe. And the other thing to note is that you can do piety afterwards for a ton of loot and pretty common map drops. I think piety has a 50% chance to drop a map, so it actually works out being pretty good. Overall, I have to say, out of all of the zones, I got the most loot from Lunaris, even if you don't count piety. But when you add piety on top, you get so much loot with Lunaris runs. I ended up, just because of the mob density and also with having lots of blues in there, and then doing the piety kill at the end if you want to, I ended up getting like 1 to 2 inventory loads of rares from each Lunaris run. So it's pretty good stuff. The next zone I ran was Library. Now this is a level 67 zone, and this is one of the two that people are thinking are the really good XP zones. Now, Library, essentially what you do is you start off at the waypoint and then you run to one of the doorways. What I did, I didn't record that, and then what I did was recording running doorway to doorway, so you can essentially run exit to exit, kind of like what you do with the ledge, just clearing a few extra little locations there. So it's a pretty efficient zone to run. Now, my average run time was around 4 minutes 30-ish for this zone. You can do it pretty quickly, and the XP per hour was a pretty solid 19,140,616, so 19.14 million XP per hour in Library. So a bit higher than Lunaris runs by about 800,000 XP per hour, so pretty nice. Some of my notes, however, is this zone is actually kind of risky. The zone overall isn't too bad, and the zone boss is very easy, but the giant skeletons and charging rowers hit very hard, so if you don't have very good physical mitigation, you can actually, you can get 1-2 shot in this zone, so you have to be a little bit cautious in there. Thankfully, I didn't have to be too cautious, but it was something that was still in the back of my mind and may have affected my run speed a little bit. The fast resets from going door to door improves your overall efficiency as well. There's less downtime between runs, which is something you should always consider. Now also the scroll containers in here, in addition to dropping much needed wisdom scrolls, they also have a higher than normal map drop rate, I believe, so you're going to get some extra 66s in here. So while you're getting some of piety from doing Lunaris runs, you're getting some from the containers in here, so that's pretty nice. And then the final zone I farmed was Catacombs. This is also a level 67 zone. My average runtime was around 6 minutes 55, so a little bit longer, and my XP per hour was 19,609,818, so 19.609 million XP per hour. So about 500k per hour more efficient than the actual library zone. So it looks like, even with the addition of the library, Catacombs might still be the most out-of-map XP efficient zone. But these are very close, and there's a lot of variability. You'd have to do like 100 runs of each to know for sure. But based on this, you can use this as a rough guideline to say that Catacombs and Library, at least on par, is efficient, but both are very good, and Catacombs possibly slightly better. And also, you can also take from this that Lunaris runs are still pretty competitive at 18.39 million. That's, only 1 million or so XP per hour less efficient, but you're getting a ton of extra loot from doing Lunaris runs. And if you're combining that with farming with a party, doing piety as well with like a magic find color, pretty good stuff in there. I also just wanted to give you a few notes on Catacombs. I almost forgot. You run in a big square in Catacombs, and there's only a small amount of backtracking, so it's a pretty efficient zone to run. Not as good as Library, but still pretty efficient, and obviously that shows up in the XP per hour. The scroll containers also appear here in Catacombs, so you're getting your higher than normal map drop rate in here as well. It's also extremely safe. So comparing the safety of Catacombs to the safety of Library with the slightly potentially higher XP in Catacombs, I'd have to recommend Catacombs as the best spot to farm XP out of maps in Path of Exile at the moment. Not to mention, you also occasionally get a large chest spawn on the path that you're running Catacombs, so that's always nice, not that you ever really get anything good from those large chests. But that's what I found out. It looks like Catacombs is the best. Library is very competitive, but slightly more risky, and Lunaris is still very competitive if you also want to get a ton of extra loot as well. Doc's really not so good, just a good baseline at 6.6 million XP per hour. Not quite there, much less effective than the other zones. So hopefully you guys found this interesting and helpful. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.